Not right away. Good morning, everybody. Excuse me, good morning. My name is Sean Malone. I have the great honor of serving as president and CEO of Dorothea Dix Park Conservancy, and just couldn't be thrilled to have all of you here today. Before I introduce Gil, I wanted to make one sort of pre-introduction. We have a number of people here today from the City Council, from the County Commissioners, from the state legislature, and certainly a lot of civic and philanthropic and other leaders in our community. But I don't think you can have any discussion that includes Dorothea Dix Park without talking about the extraordinary leadership and vision of the city of Raleigh in making this unparalleled opportunity possible and making sure that this opportunity wasn't lost. And so before we get going, I was hoping that our Mayor Nancy McFarland would come up and say a few words of welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting all of this together. Very excited about the talk we're going to hear this morning, and even more excited to see all of the work that everybody in this room has done to really make Dix Park a reality. And it seems like each step obviously brings us closer to a goal, but each step brings more excitement from the community, makes it more of a reality, just explains more and more of the incredible possibilities that are out there for us. So thanks again, thanks to the Conservancy for all of their help. They're an incredible partner, and I know we're going to do great things together. So thanks so much.
All right, so when we invited everybody, we sent out Gil's bio, and because I know of the intelligence in this room, I'm not going to read the whole bio. But I do want to reiterate the first two sentences of his bio because it struck me. They struck me. Gil Penalosa is passionate about cities for all people. He advises decision makers and communities on how to create vibrant cities and healthy communities for everyone, regardless of age and social, economic, or ethnic background. And that really struck me because that is both why Gil is here, and it's also why everybody in this room is here when we talk about decision makers and communities and how they look toward the community that we're all creating together. There has been, from the city staff to city leadership to the county to the state to philanthropists to business leaders to community activists, such a passion for, even at this early stage, creating Dorothea Dix Park as a place for everyone, as a transformative public space for community, health, and celebration that will meaningfully enrich our quality of life here in North Carolina. And that is an extraordinary opportunity. We stand here just a couple of weeks after the public launch of the city staff's community engagement and planning process that was extraordinary, as is the whole process. And I was just told a couple days ago by Kate Pierce, who's leading the effort for the city, that it was the highest attended public meeting in the history of the city of Raleigh, which is pretty exciting as well. And there's such a passion, I think, among so many people to make this a park for everyone, built by everyone. And so as we all embark together over the next 18 months on the master planning for a project that really does have the potential to transform individual lives and transform this entire community and the state, we're very fortunate to have Gil Penalosa here to inform and inspire us so that Dix Park can reach its truly remarkable potential. I can't think of anyone better to help set the stage and help move us on to this next phase. And so without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Gil Penalosa.
Thank you. What a magnificent park. I think you must be very, very proud of what you have done to set aside this land for a park, because I'm sure there's many, many pressures about what to do with such a wonderful land. So we're going to talk about parks. We're going to talk about cities. And obviously, Dix Park and cities is totally interwoven, and that interwovenness has to be strengthened. And when we talk about cities, of course, we got to talk about climate change and population growth and the urban growth, because all of the growth in the U.S. is taking place in the cities and around the world as well. And we got public health crisis, physical, mental, emotional. We're living longer. We're not only living longer, we're living much, much longer. All over the world. You know, just 200 years ago, we've been around for over 200,000 years. But 200 years ago, we didn't have any, all of these this is the life expectancy, all of those are the countries in the world. We didn't have any country with a life expectancy above 45. Today, we don't have any country with a life expectancy below 45. It's amazing what is taking place. But at the same time, with all of these issues, there seems to be kind of like an emergency. So we got to recreate the cities for all people. And there are some ingredients. It's like if we're going to do some pasta, we boil some water. We put on the pasta. But we only put water, then it's going to be spiceless pasta. And people won't want to come home to eat their pasta. So we got two options. Either we get nice ingredients, or people are going to go somewhere else. So we get the nice ingredients and we get the nice pasta, and then people are going to stay. The cities also have some ingredients, such as the parks, the streets, the sidewalks, the walking, the sustainable mobility. These are kind of like spices. So we need a rally that is a spice. There are some spice cities and some spiceless cities. People don't want to live in the spiceless cities. They want to move away. By the way, I'm not talking about quantity. I'm talking about quality. I mean, many, many more people are going to come to Raleigh, regardless. The U.S. is going to grow by over 120 million people in the next 30 years. So you are going to get more people. But it's the quality of people. And that is something that is key. It's very, very important. We live in an ever more globalized world. And in a globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere. Anywhere. However you define best. It can be the best engineers, medical doctors, pizza makers, community organizers, musicians. If I'm a really good carpenter, I can live anywhere in the world. So where am I going to live? Wherever me and my family have the best quality of life. So that is, people want to live in spice cities. People don't want to live in spices. Let me give you an image. It's not about, this building has won a lot of architectural awards, but if you come to a new city and you don't know anybody, is this where you are going to go to meet people? Or this one? So that's spiceless, this is spice. Sometimes we got some parking lots that are used just for a few hours a week, or sometimes we can use them 24/7. It's not about the money. This park costs a lot of money. But what do you do here? Nothing. You come here, you take a photo, and you checked. You're never going to go back. This one doesn't cost a lot of money, and people are going to go there. And they're going to come over and over and over because there are a lot of things to do. So we got to have a spice rally. A spice with a vibrant city and healthy communities where people are going to live happier. We're going to talk about sustainable happiness. The well-being of the individual, as long as it doesn't affect others and the environment and the future. And it's about all people. And we're going to talk about the relationship of this park, about recreating a city for all people. In many ways, it's how do we want to live? I think that if we have a shared vision of how do we want to live, a lot of the other decisions are pretty simple. So we're talking about urban parks. We're talking about public places. But also, I want to mention sustainable mobility, because how are we going to get to Dix Park? How are we going to get to places? And when I'm talking about sustainable mobility, I'm going to talk about walking and riding bicycles and using public transit and new uses of cars. And when I'm talking about walking and cycling, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. Many, many people could be walking. And actually today someone said, oh, but what if it rains? Well, there is no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. And also having a nice attitude like this kid. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling, that's how People get around. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Even in the wealthiest neighborhood of Raleigh, in the wealthiest, more than 1 out of 3 people, their only individual mode of mobility is to walk or to bike. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for children and youth. You might be the son or the daughter of the wealthiest person in Raleigh. If you're under 16, your only individual mode of mobility is to walk or bike. So safe walking and cycling should be almost like a human right. Unless you think that only the people that have the money and the age and the desire to have a car are the only ones that have individual mobility. So that's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability. We got to keep in mind that every single trip to the park begins and ends walking. We walk to the car, we walk to public transit, we walk to the bicycles, we walk to places. And when we're talking about parks this morning, I want you to open up your minds about parks and public spaces. 2 weeks ago, I was working in Poland, and they had these beautiful statues in the sidewalks. And then someone felt that they were getting cold, so they donated their scarf. Then some people little people start pushing the ball, the children come over, and they start helping them out. You know, the sidewalks are kind of like a park. Sometimes cities think of sidewalks as part of the street. No. On the street, on the bikeways, on the buses, we go from A to B. On the sidewalk, no. The sidewalk is where we live. We develop a sense of belonging. That's where we meet boyfriends and girlfriends, and the people that sell flowers and fruits. And we sit and watch people go by. But parks and public places and sidewalks are great. A few months ago, I was working in Malmo. Malmo is a city that had totally to reinvent itself. It was totally industrial, and they lost half of the jobs in 2 years. They had to reinvent themselves. I love this park, this skateboard park. Not really because it has a nice tree in the middle, but because it has a nice, cozy area for parents, for grandparents. Every time in Raleigh that we do a small park, a playground, or a big park like Dix Park, we got to do a lot of these nice, cozy areas. Otherwise, the parents and grandparents are going to take their children, and they're going to get bored in 5 minutes, and they will want to go home. But they can socialize. So the park, Detroit is going through a huge revitalization. How are they doing? Part of it is through the public spaces. Sometimes it's big parks in the middle of the city like Piedmont. Sometimes are elevated like Highline. Or the big in Chicago. Sometimes along the rivers, like the Mississippi River. Or the Charles in Boston. And whatever we do in the parks is so many activities. I was working in Chicago during the last World Cup. Where did I go see the soccer World Cup? In the parks. And that's what they were doing in South Korea, and in Bogota, and in Germany. It's amazing what happens in the parks. But again, it's not just about sports. They had the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong. They went to the parks. Or Occupy Wall Street. They went to the parks. You know, the parks and the public places are magnificent equalizers. Here, no one cares who's young or old, rich or poor, fat or skinny, or Jesuit Charlie. But again, it's not just politics. Here we got 2 million people in Rio. It wasn't during the World Cup. It was 3 months before. The Pope came and had a mass for 2 million people. And it was magnificent. But again, it doesn't have to be a big place. You get a small stair, and all of a sudden you transform people. Imagine the details of Dix Park when you get a stair. And just from the point of view of citizen engagement, imagine you get a family, you get 130 steps, and each family paints one step and put their initials, the level of commitment. That's why sometimes people say, oh, Gil was a good city. I said a good city is one where I want to sleep at home, but I want to live outside. So I think Raleigh is a city that we needed for people to want to live outside. So I really want to thank the city and Kate and Sean and the Conservancy for inviting me to share some ideas. I'm going to be talking about cities and Dix Park. I'm going to put some emphasis on equity and public health. To put things into context, I'm going to talk a little bit about Bogota and 880 cities, and then I'm going to have 6 messages for Raleigh. Why Bogota? Obviously, it's not the ideal city. It's decades behind Raleigh. However, I was commissioner there. And I learned that transforming cities is not really about the money. It's not a technical issue. It's not about the money. And also, I've been doing, now I advise many cities. For example, in the first term, we built over 200 parks. We built parks all over the city. This was one of them. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then he left, and then nothing happened in 27 years. No, there were not even sidewalks. Why nothing happened? Because change is hard. Change is hard in Raleigh, change is hard in Bogota or in Copenhagen or in New York. Change is hard everywhere because when you try to change, the cave people show up. They are the citizens against virtually everything. You try to do and they resuscitate. But we got to remember that we are there is to get things done, not to have 20 excuses where things cannot be done. We got to become champions at finding solutions to the problems, not at finding problems to the solution. So we got to find that little crack through the window and run through there. So it was like this for 27, 30 years. And in 3 years, we turned it into the nicest park. So when Kate was telling me that you haven't defined if you're going to do it in 5 or 10 or 20 years, I said, no, not 20, 4 years. It's that developing that sense of urgency. Building these parks is about many things. Walking trails. The highest cost benefit of any park, of any size, is walking paths. In the small neighborhood park, in the medium park, in the big park, that's the number one activity in the parks, is to walk. And again, it's not just about active, it's also about passive, it's about contemplative. Sometimes it's activities that we want to do in big groups. Sometimes it's activities that we want to do by themselves or with a friend. So it's about activities. And like I love the lake that you have next to it at NC State, but of course there has to be a way to integrate it in somehow through a really nice connection and paths. And it's also thinking what is good for everybody. We had a huge pressure. The city was going to host the World Championships of cycling, and they just wanted to do a velodrome. I said, we'll do a velodrome if and only if we do something inside. And then it was a huge fight because the cyclists hated me for it, and the media were with the cyclists. Now I'm really happy that I was so stubborn, because when I go to the velodrome now, I see the Lone Ranger cyclists up there and hundreds of people skating. Boys and girls and people of every. So at some point we got to think what is good for everybody. We got to have also the park with flexibility to do many activities. And remember, a pope came and left there 30 years ago. Well, last month, the 3 popes later, he came to Bogota last month, and again, another 1 million people went to this park, and it's holding up very nice. I love linear parks. Linear parks connect. I think one of the linear parks that I thought yesterday would be magnificent is along the railroad. Can you imagine the railroad going into the park, connecting the downtown to the park? That's something that you got to convince the rail company how to do it. But that would be fantastic. I love linear parks because they connect. Like this one, we interconnected some of the wealthiest parts of the city with some of the poorest. We did over 29 kilometers, so it was like 15 miles. This is where it ended, next to the Bogota River. There was before, and this was after. Some areas that were so poor. And obviously, hundreds of neighborhood parks, because it's not just about doing a big park. Raleigh needs a nice city-wide park systems with big parks, with Dixie, not only Dix Park, but also small neighborhood parks at medium size. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And no, we didn't do Central Park. But that was my inspiration, Central Park, for ciclovia. What is ciclovia? Something that we call in North America open streets. In Charlotte, they are doing it. Frederick Olmsted. These were the kind of people. That's why I love what you're doing in Raleigh. Because it seems like 150 years ago, people were more visionary. And people were saving land for big parks and big projects. But now not as many. So 160 years ago, Olmsted was saying that in New York, everybody hated everybody. The locals and the immigrants, the blacks and the white, the rich and the poor. And he said, they don't know each other. They don't live in the same buildings. Their children don't go to the same schools. We need to find places where people can meet each other as equals. And that was a big driving force to do Central Park in the 1850s. And the more that I think of Central Park, and when I became commissioner, and I would think of all the magnificent uses and activities. And Central Park is great not just because it has gigantic concerts, because it has hundreds of little activities. Halloween is coming up and someone is carving pumpkins. It's nice in the summer, but also it's nice in the winter. But then I said, any city could have a Central Park, at least from the point of view of social integration and physical activity. And that's when I thought I had a program of a few miles and few thousand people, and we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. Sunday mornings, we pop it up, and people come out to walk, to bike, to skate. How do we do it? It's really simple. You open streets to people, you close them to cars, and the magic happens. Young, old, rich, poor, all of these colors are the different income levels. We interconnected everybody. 75 miles every Sunday and holiday. We also interconnected all of the main parks so that people could, from anywhere in the city, could get to the park, to the Dix Park of the city, and then everybody, young and old, people of all ages. But not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate, so along the road, we do aerobics and Tai Chi and cha-cha-cha. Anything, as long as it's around physical activity. We're going to get people active, have physical activity. Who comes? Everybody. All you really need is 2 feet and a heartbeat, and you're going to be there, and it's fun, young, old, rich, poor. We get over 1.7 million people every Sunday and holiday. But the nice thing is that it changes minds. All of a sudden, we realize, and every city that does it shakes themselves and say, oh, wow, the streets are public space. They belong to everybody. They are not just to move cars. They can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. And it has become like a positive virus. City of angels and cars. LA now, they got their own ciclavia, and Portland. This works in communities of 10,000 people, 100,000, 5 million, 10 million, everywhere. It's something that is really great. New York, Park Avenue, the most iconic. It's also about social integration. We've been working in places like South Africa, where there is so much segregation, or India, where there's also so many issues. The activities might be a little bit different in each one, but always about physical activity, always about integrating. Paris has it throughout the year, even through the middle of the winter. The winter in Paris is a lot colder than in Raleigh, and they have it all year. We meet each other as equals, and that is something that is, some of the wealthiest people and their spouses and children doing the same activities are the minimum wage workers and the spouses and children. Afterwards, my brother became mayor. He built 175 miles of protected byways in 3 years. 175 miles in 3 years. Interconnecting the city, getting from a few thousand to more than 500,000 people cycling. And in some of these places, it was creating a grid, but some of these neighborhoods were so poor that it's almost impossible for you in beautiful Raleigh to imagine the level of poverty in some of these neighborhoods and how they were transformed with really good bikeways and sidewalks. Why do we need to have good sidewalks? Because we need to dignify the pedestrians. We need to dignify the cyclists. And that is part of what's important. So it was a major transformation on this. And when I'm talking about walking this morning, I'm talking about anybody moving at the speed of the pedestrians. But now I run 2 organizations. One is 880 Cities and World Urban Parks. And I have been lucky to have worked in over 250 different cities in the last 10 years. World Urban Parks, and I hope Dix Park is going to be a member. Basically, we think that everybody should have quality urban parks within walking distance. All kinds of parks, active, passive. We got lots of committees. Not only we got committees such as large urban parks, but also committees that have to do with Dix Park, the children, play, and nature. Older adults and parks, knowledge, and everybody around the world, healthy parks, healthy cities. People are there is no health system in the world that is going to survive if it's only curative. It has to be preventive. So you can get more information at worldurbanparks.org. But everywhere I go, people say, Gil, what's 880 Cities? What is that, 880 Cities? Well, 880 Cities is not really about parks or streets or walking or cycling. Those are the symptoms. Those are the means. Those are not the ends. The end is, how can we have successful cities? You know, a few months ago, I was working in Warsaw, and I saw where I was going to speak the day after, and I see all of these people dancing. And I said, oh, my God, how am I going to compete with that the next day? And I see the DJ Vika. We're living longer. People are active. People want to do things. So it's about healthy cities and happier people. And when people always say, Gil, is this intersection safe? Can my children walk to school? Can my grandparents ride their bike to get eggs or milk? You don't need to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. We call it the 80 rule of common sense. Unfortunately, common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. Step number 1, think of a child that you love, your son, your daughter, your grandchild. Once you have that child in mind, step number 2, think of an 80-year-old that you also love, your parents, your grandparents, brothers, sisters. And when you have the child and the older adult in mind, then go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking to the park? Would you send them cycling to Dix Park? Would they feel safe? If you would, it's because he's safe enough. If you would not, it's because he's not. And we got to do it better. What if everything that you did in Raleigh, everything, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the school, the library, the office building, the restaurant, everything had to be good for an 8 and an 80. It's not 8 to 80, it's 8 and 80 as an indicator species. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody, from 0 to over 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic and build great cities for all. That is the concept of 880 cities. But we got to move fast. There's an urgency. And like Einstein said, we cannot solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking that we use when we create them. So I want to go through 6 messages here in Raleigh. The first one. Everything that we do around in Raleigh, and especially around Dix Parks, I want everyone in this room to be a guardian angel. A guardian angel of the gentle majority. The gentle majority are the children, the older adults, the poor. Sometimes we do public meetings in the evening, the children are sleeping or doing homework. The poor have 2 and 3 jobs. They don't go to the public meetings. So any decision that we make, we should always think, how is this going to impact the children, the older adults? And when I talk gentle, it's because they're not the squeaky wheel. And actually, when we evaluate any city, any community, we should evaluate about how we treat the most vulnerable people. So also, talking about Dix Park, in the planning process, we should always keep in mind the children, the older adults, the poor. Let me give you an example of children. In Raleigh, we should have playability everywhere. Everywhere. We go on the sidewalk and the children can have a swing. They're waiting for public transit and have a small parklet. So more than anything, having playability is an attitude. It's changing our mindsets. All of a sudden, we got some crosswalks. So it's not about money. And sometimes people say, oh, nice, children and playing, that's fun and games. Yeah, it's fun and games, but it's much more than that. Playing is how children learn. Playing is how children develop their muscle strength, their cognitive thinking, their sociability, their sense of belonging, their capacity to learn languages, their coordination. That's the power of Dix Park. That for children, and we really gotta keep that in mind. We gotta have that sense of belonging, and we gotta think of children also under 5. All of them. In Raleigh and everywhere, we should have a goal that every child should have a park or a play area within a 10-minute walk. Everyone. So we should start building parks all over the place. We gotta decide, do a map. Whoever doesn't have a park or a play area within a 10-minute walk, we gotta build a park. And it's totally doable. And it's in the next 4 years. Oh, but since here your political terms are only 2, then in the next 2. Imagine, these are going to be the future workers here at SAS, the future engineers. You know, New York thought that everybody had a park within walking distance. And they did a plan 7 years ago, and they saw that many people did not have a park within walking distance. So they said, okay, what belongs to us? What is public? The schools, the sidewalk, the street, the library, city hall. They went to the schools and they said, this horrible thing you call playground is just a bunch of pavement. This is the playgrounds of 90% of the schools in America. It doesn't make sense. So they say, we'll make a real playground if and only if we make it a school park. That after 4 p.m. it's open to the community, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, and they turn it into this. Beautiful, with all of these trees and green areas. And then why is the tree so important? Because when children play in green areas, they reduce the attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. But they didn't do just 1 or 2. They have done 221 schools turning into this. New York increased by more than 22% their playgrounds without buying 1 inch of land. This school can take up to 55,000 gallons of water. And look at all of the plants, the gardening, and all of these activities. And you go to Copenhagen and you see all of the schools, and in front of the schools you got all of the playgrounds and the activities. So in the school time, it's for the school after 4 p.m. and Saturdays. And if you don't have a school, then take over a street and make it a play street. But with all kids in Raleigh should have a park or a play area. So what is the role of Dix Park? The Dix Park can be a magnificent trigger to say, okay, this is not just about the park. How are we going to enhance and have the influence? And the nice thing is that we say every child should have a park within walking distance. But if every child has a park within walking distance, every older adult and everybody's going to have a park within walking distance. I'm talking about older adults. This is really, really exciting because we're living longer, not longer, much, much longer. You know, the people that have ever lived to 65 in the history of humanity, half are alive today. Half. It's fantastic. In the US, the population over 65, 100 years ago, practically there were none. And look how it's growing. It's amazing. This is the population today, and look how it's going to grow by 2050, all ages, but especially the ones over 50. It's exciting. The population over 65 are going to double, and people are happy and excited and healthy. People are not thinking about retirement, but about retirement. Maybe we should create a movement, the 60 plus alive. I think the biggest waste of resource in America are the older adults. People retire and we cross them out as if they had died, except that they got 20, 30, 40 years left. And they are alive and they want to live. They are healthier and wealthier and more active with more knowledge and experience. They could be teaching English to immigrants. They could be tutoring kids in the schools. They could be organizing activities in the parks, Tai Chi and yoga and all kinds of activities. The older adults could be magnificent sources for the city. The older adults are universities. NC State should have 20, 30% of the courses for people over 60. Older adults are hungry. They want to learn about music and history and science. So Dix Park is going to have to play a main role in the older adults. The people over 80 are going to quadruple. You know, if we had been born in the U.S. 200 years ago, the life expectancy in the U.S. was 39. So most of us will be dead by now. Now, it's more than double. We learn to survive. But when we got all of these issues, it's very clear that now we need to learn how to live. And Dix Park is a place where we are going to learn how to live. Because we're going to learn about the environment and about recreation and about economic development and about social integration and people of all ages. So the older adults can really transform, and the parks can be something that is magnificent. But we need to have activities and uses for the older adults, because the older adults are the least users of parks in America as proportion to the population. So Dix Park has a big challenge. How to turn that around? You know, in North Carolina, half of the population growth from now to 2040 is going to be over 65. In Raleigh, 1 out of 4 people are going to be over 65. So this is changing very, very, very fast. Actually, you know, you started doing a lot of subsidies. Sometimes cities think of older adults and they say, oh, it's going to cost too much because of the subsidies. No. Get rid of the senior subsidies. Don't subsidize the seniors. It doesn't make any sense. You know, it made sense to subsidize the seniors 50 years ago when the seniors were very poor. You know, 50 years ago, the level of poverty in the U.S. was around 13%, and the seniors were like 29%. This is a major success story in the U.S. In only 2 generations, it went from being twice as much to being almost half. Also because it doesn't make any sense to subsidize in 2017 by age. Why subsidize a 70-year-old millionaire just because he or she is 70, and not subsidize a 40-year-old single mom or dad in poverty just because he or she is 40? But instead, so let's not look at the older adults as a liability, but as an asset, a magnificent asset to the community. And it could really transform our perceptions. And the poor. I'm talking about equity. I'm not talking about equality. Someone did these cartoons that I thought is really nice to different. This is equality. No, some people are starting so far behind that some people might not even need a box, while others might need 2 and 3 boxes. And a few weeks ago, I saw someone that did an additional cartoon. He said, this is equality, this is equity, this is reality. But instead of maybe shuffling boxes one way or the other, we really got to think outside the box. Maybe instead of putting boxes, maybe we got to take down the wall. Or maybe we gotta think differently in our solutions. Because this is how we've been building cities. And the children, we've not done a really good job. You know, the US, the wealthiest country in the world, and we got over 13 million children that live in poverty. This is the share of children living in poverty. In the US, 1 out of 5. The wealthiest country in the world. And you say, oh yeah, but what are we gonna do? Well, South Korea is 1 out of 16. Denmark is 1 out of 37. You know, what does Denmark has that the US doesn't? Or what does Copenhagen has that Raleigh doesn't? I mean, one of the things is this. I think Raleigh, and when we talk about Dix Park and Raleigh in general, you need to be ambitious. Ambitious. I mean, if you want to do a list of cities that are worse than Raleigh, you can do a list of 1,000 cities in 5 minutes. But if you compare yourself with cities that are worst, eventually you're going to look like those. No, you got to say, okay, which are the cities around the world the similar size of Raleigh, which have the best parks, which has the best mobility, which has the best quality of air, which was the best health, which on everything. And then compare yourself with those, and then be ambitious. You got magnificent universities. You got a huge growth. You got so many high-tech companies. You got all the research triangle around you. So there is absolutely no reason. Be very bold and ambitious. I think that's one of the things that I love about Dix Park, that everyone that I've talked to about Dix Park, they want to do a world-class park. They realize this. You know, because we really need to do cities better. Just as an example, I was working last year in Cleveland, and I went to this part of the city. The life expectancy is 64. And then 8 miles apart is 90. It doesn't make any sense. And it's not because it's Cleveland. You go to Washington, D.C., and you see the same. You go to New Orleans, and you see the same. And I don't know what is worse, that this is happening or that people are assuming this is normal. Oh, you know, it's because these people, they're lazy. They drink too much beer. That's why the life expectancy is 50% less than the others. With the parks, you know, you go to South Fresno, and you get 1 acre per 1,000. You go to North Fresno, you get almost 5 times more. And I know that some people say, oh, parks, what is the issue with parks and poverty? Maybe we shouldn't do Dix Park. Maybe we should do housing or something else. People criticize me a lot when we did over 200 parks in one term, and then another 600 in the next one when my brother became mayor. We did over 800 parks. And I said, look, if you are really concerned about the poor people, when the poor people feel miserable, it's in the leisure time. In the leisure time. When people are working, the CEO of the bank or the minimum wage worker cleaning floors, they have a similar time. Maybe the CEO of the bank has more stress and more anxiety. But in the leisure time, that CEO has restaurants and theaters and country clubs and cottages and travels. That minimum wage worker doesn't have many options. So the parks are really improving the quality of life. It's not just because it's fun and games. It's about quality of life for that person and his or her family. Parks are absolutely critical to improve the quality of life of everybody. That's why I think that Dix Park can be great for everybody. I'm going to go much faster on the other 5 messages. No worries. But we got a great opportunity. You know, the cities, we're growing so much. Around the world, we got 3.5 billion people living in cities. By 2050, in 40 years, we're going to have 7 billion. Can you imagine? And it can be very civilized. You know, we're going to have 3.7 billion within the lifetime of the students at NC State. Within their lifetime. We're going to increase by 3.7 billion in their lifetime of these kids that I saw in one of the parks in Raleigh. That's going to be in 40 years. So I said, if that's going to happen in 40 years, that we're going to double the population, then why don't we see what have we done in the last 40? Because if what we have done is good, let's just do more of the same. In the last 40, well, people like this, these 8 guys have more wealth than everybody, than half of the people in the world. Imagine the political power and so on. This is how we've been building cities in the last 40 years. We haven't really done a very good job. We have been focusing car more rather than in people's happiness. And it's not the same. This is what we've been building around the cities, and we haven't solved the issue of mobility when we are investing billions and billions in all of these highways. And the new emerging economies are doing the same in China, in Russia, in India. So what are we gonna do? That's what we've been doing in the last 40, so we haven't really done very good in the last 40. So what are we gonna do in the next 40? The US is gonna grow by 120 million people. There are many, many forecasts, and all of them say, so the US is gonna build around 40 million homes. Many of those are gonna come to Raleigh and to North Carolina in general. The cities do not really decide the what, the amount of people. That's more at the federal level. But the cities do decide the how. How are you going to have that density? These are 10 different ways of having density. You can either have the 40-story buildings every other block, or you can have 5-story buildings next to each other, which I like a lot more than the 40-story buildings, or you can have huge sprawl. Is this how we're going to grow? This is absolutely critical, because this is what we've been doing in the last 40 years. Imagine the children, the older adults, the handicapped in these communities. They are kind of slaves to someone that has a car, even just to go for an ice cream. To go to a park. How are people going to get to the park? Raleigh. It's amazing. The next 25 years, we are going to grow by around 75%. Huge population growth. That means that about almost half of the housing and the people that are going to be around by 2040 hasn't been done yet. Hasn't been done. So those communities, what a magnificent, imagine you had a magic wand and you could redo 40% of Raleigh. The current, even the best 40%. Well, you could do it even better. That's the magnificent opportunity that you have over the next 30, 40 years. How are you going to do it? Is everybody going to have a park within walking distance? Are you going to do big schools or small schools? If you do small schools, they're going to be walk-to schools. If you're going to do big schools, they're going to be drive-to schools. So you got to improve the communities that you have today, and that's what you're working on, but you also got to create a great Raleigh for these many more people. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity, but also enormous responsibility, because that's how people are going to live for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I know that change is hard. Change is hard everywhere. That's why people do more of the same, because it's easier. My friend Jan Gell said that even in Copenhagen, the car was taking over in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And when they said we're going to do a pedestrian street for people walking, they said, what a pedestrian, we love their cars. And the weather is horrible in Copenhagen. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, it rains all year. But the number one reason why they didn't want pedestrian streets, they said, oh, it's because walking is not part of our culture. Walking on the streets, that's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy, but we are Danish and we are cold and quiet. Now the Danish are more Italian than the Italians. They love the pedestrian streets in the middle of the winter. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. They turned 18 of those parking lots into people places. And even in the middle of the winter, very successful. So when you're going to change in Raleigh, I want to recommend 3 considerations. First, change is not unanimous. Change is not unanimous. So when you're going to change and people say, oh, but there is some concern, there will always be some concern. Honestly listen to everybody, but realize that it's not going to be unanimous. Second, the general interest must prevail over the particular. The general interest must prevail over the particular. So listen to, even in every public meeting, tell people, if you're going to say, oh, but we're going to widen the sidewalk, we're going to improve the access to Dix Park. And people say, oh, but my business. Say, no, don't talk about your business. Give me the same argument, but frame it as the general interest. And third, when you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something else. So you say no to the park. Okay, that's it. You are saying yes to more bad quality of air. You are saying yes to more obesity. You are saying yes to more issues of mental health, and so on. 3, we got to have great parks and great park spaces. Let me give you some symptoms of good public places, because we hear a lot when we listen, and also we see a lot when we observe. One symptom, good places to sit. You know, this guy needed 5 chairs to be happy. he would not have been as happy on a bench. Sometimes people see, monkey does. Sometimes it's people see, and people do. We do sidewalks, and we don't put benches on the sidewalks. Or we even put nails so that the young people won't be able to sit. This guy was so tired, he's sitting on his briefcase while his friend fainted. And his wife is sitting on their baby. Yeah. But when you got nice places to sit, it's magical. It's kind of magical. Even in the middle of the winter, people go out and read a book. In the movable chairs, people don't even sit facing each other. They see facing other people. Starts to rain, and people won't even move. Another symptom is sociability. If you go to the park and you see people talking to each other. Another symptom is diversity. When you see children, you see youth, you see older adults, you see people on wheelchairs. Another is affection. We are affectionate when we feel at ease, when we feel safe. Another symptom, high proportion of women. Women are more selective. If the place is not safe, if it doesn't feel safe, you're not going to have. So those are symptoms. But some characteristics of a nice park. One is management. The biggest problem of parks in the U.S. is management. They are undermanaged. And management takes many ways. People tend to think that management is synonymous of maintenance. No. Maintenance is just a small part, maybe 20% of management. Picking up the garbage and cutting the grass. Management is how to engage all the faith groups, how to engage the schools around the area, how to have activities in the daytime, in the nighttime, in the summer, but in the winter. All the time. It's about those uses, those activities, people walking and cycling and running and playing chess and having dinner. It's about having volunteers, but having the tools for the volunteers. It's when you're going to do something, engage the community, ask them before, during, after. The community has to be part of it. It's about having resources, human, financial, physical. It's about safety, but not like I saw in a park in London that said that it had a sign, beware, thieves in this area. In the parks, you need a lot of police when they're empty. You don't need police when they're used. So the best safety of the parks and the sidewalks and the public places is to have good uses. We got to have equitable access for people of all incomes and all levels. We got to have a good fit with the system so that you don't have the same. You go to Central Park and you see dozens and dozens of playgrounds. None of them are alike. We got to have activities for the winter. We got to have activities for the summer. Some people want to get married in the summer, others want to get married in the winter. So the uses and the activities is something that is absolutely critical. I've seen in Raleigh, in some of the parks, some of these activities, people of all ages and ethnicities and backgrounds, the walkability. 2 weeks ago, I was working in Singapore. Even a small one. This one is just like a 1/3 of a mile. So it's not just the big parks. All of the parks having that walking path. And maybe this is in front of a library. And maybe even adding a small sign, welcome, and put a small sign. And people love it because when they walk, then they go back home and they tell their family, their children, their grandchildren, oh, I did 2 kilometers. How do you know? Oh, because there was a sign, 6 laps, and so on. So the uses and the activities is something that is very important. And it's not about the money. It's more an attitude. Many different options of activities doing in the park. It might be just ping pong tables. That is taken. It might be Tai Chi. So whatever activities, but the uses and the activities. And this is something that has already started in Dix Park. And I love when I was talking with Kate, and yesterday she gave me a fantastic tour and told me about all of the activities. Sometimes it's simple. It might be as simple as laughing yoga. I was at a park in Mumbai, and I saw all of this group of people just walking around and dancing and laughing. And I said, what are they doing? And they said, oh, laughing yoga. I had never heard of that. But they said, join them. And within 20 seconds, you were also laughing. And people say, should we do small or large parks? Should we do Dix Park or a lot of small ones? Well, we need both, because they satisfy different needs. We need the small neighborhood park. Very, very important, because the small neighborhood park develops the sense of belonging. That's where we meet our neighbors. Also improves safety, because if we know all our neighbors and something is happening in the neighborhood, we go out and help. We develop a sense of solidarity. But if we don't know anybody, something is happening, we close the door and stay inside. But we're not going to be able to play soccer there or baseball. So we need to have medium-sized parks. And we're not going to be able to go canoeing or do other activities, so we need the large parks. We actually need a system of small, of medium, of large, contemplative, active. And part of having a nice system, there are some for example, we got to have great parks, obviously. Central Park is one of them, and we hear a lot of them. Central Park is interesting because it's one of the first ones that had a conservancy in the U.S. But they were not as lucky as you are. Central Park, the conservancy began because Central Park was being run down. It was created 150 years ago, the park, but about 40 years ago, it was being run down, and some people got together and said, how can we improve? And they started a conservancy. And they started asking people, and they went to people like you asking for money. People said, money? I pay taxes. I'm not going to give money for parks. But then they said, look, this is going to, you give money to the opera, you give money to the National Ballet, you give money to a museum. The park might have more to do with your quality of life and the city than any of those. Don't stop giving to those, but think of the community, think of the city. And that's how the conservancy began. And they have big money. Sometimes they have dinners. Fred owns the dinner, $5,000 a plate. But also they fundraise $2 a piece for a daffodil. They want to have, imagine that everyone in Raleigh gave at least a quarter to Dix Park. So everybody will feel that sense of belonging. Every child in an elementary, they go there, they give a quarter, they give $1, and they get a sticker, and they get something that they can take home and put it in their room, or a pin or something. So you develop that sense of, we need the $1 million funders, but you also need the $1 funders, that everybody in Raleigh will have given something. And it's not just Central Park. You know some other parks like this one in Toronto that I love because it has so many activities. It seems just like any regular park, but has many, many details. For example, has nice, healthy food in some places, has this playground that looks very typical, but it has also this one. That, it's just about water and some paddles and things, and the kids love it. Also having the summer reading, the activities, places for the parents, for the grandparents. So it's about having fire pits. The young people love the fire pits, and then they want to go. Also having the community gardens. The pizza ovens is great. The young people love the pizza ovens. So have the uses and the activities is something that is great. Piedmont Park, down the road in Atlanta, the same thing. Piedmont Park has a really nice park with many, many uses and activities. And I think each one of these conservancies is different. They have different models, different uses, different reaches, different relationship with the city. And you got to develop your own, what works for Raleigh. Also, you got to have sufficient land in Raleigh. There are many, many cities. Cities like San Diego, Portland. You can see Boston, for example, on this one. Boston, almost every kid has a park within walking distance. City like LA has a lot of parkland, but all of it is in one part of the city. So in LA, 2 out of 3 kids do not have a park within walking distance. And by the way, you see all of the obesity and where the riots and all of this, everything is linked to everything. That's exactly where it happens. So we gotta have sufficient land, quantity, quality of land for active, for passive, for contemplative. We have to be connected. The connectivity of Dix Park is gonna be critical. Access, geographical, financial. We also gotta have stable funding, taxes. By far is the most important, but also what are you going to do with all of those buildings? Maybe some of those buildings, good stakeholders that will develop some kind of ownership and help the park is critical, but also they can give some money into it. We got to have a shared vision of the city park system. That's important. So those are some of the elements. Let me give you another park as an idea of the kind of activities. This park, they used to call it Needle Park. The neighbors wanted to sell it because there were 8 people that were doing drugs. So there were only 8 people, so everybody was doing drugs. So someone said, oh, Mayor, no, don't sell it. What if you bring 500 people? 8 out of 8 is everybody. 8 out of 500 is no one. So this is a park that is smaller than Dix Park, but nevertheless, they did a lot of interesting things. They had a conservancy, a fantastic conservancy. But, by the way, something very important. These are public parks where they have conservancies. So the steering, my philosophy is that the city, the government, should do more of the steering and let the private sector do more of the rowing. The private sector is much better at doing the operations, like renting bicycles or boats or cutting the grass. But the city is the one that has to do the steering and has to have a lot of brain power doing the steering so that when they hire someone to rent bikes, They say, okay, how can we do the best contract possible? For example, the best contract is not just money. The best contract might be, okay, charge whatever you want Saturdays and Sundays. But Monday through Friday, we're going to bring all of the schools of the city through, and you're going to lend them for free Monday through Friday. Or any other activity. So more steering and less rowing. Look at all of these activities, for example, things that people love to do with their children, many simple things that people can do, children, adults, the carousel. Flexibility. You come here in the weekdays and you see people just watching people, and at night they have movies, and on the weekends in the same place, the Italians are playing bocce. So having flexibility, and also having, for example, invite Lululemon to do yoga, but have a small sign. It doesn't have to be something gigantic. It's the park, it's to dignify. But then free yoga, the activities, everything in this park is free. You have different kinds of music on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays, on Thursdays. And the knitting. Knitting is one of the fastest growing activities. You know, the older adults, the two main concerns of older adults are mobility and isolation. Knitting is, people could be knitting at home. They go to the park because they want to be with other people. Knitting is just the excuse. But also they got concerts and activities, and they got all these magnificent, they got Wi-Fi for everybody, and reading areas for children, and reading areas for adults, and the ping pong tables, and the chairs, the movable chairs that work really fantastic. I don't really know what this guy's telling his wife is. Or even if it's his wife. But this guy didn't even know that the concert already finished. Look at this. This is the washrooms now. You go into the washrooms, and you got these magnificent fresh-cut flowers. And you say, why do you have fresh-cut flowers at the entrance of a public washroom? And then someone said, because people behave differently. When you go to a public washroom and you see these fresh-cut flowers, and everything inside is marble, you keep it really, really nice. But if you go in and everything is graffiti and horrible, people leave it even worse. So a successful park is not just the design and the construction, it's also the management. And the management has already started, and I've seen lots of good activities. So I think a good city, another definition is like a good park, totally integrated with nature and extremely safe, especially for children, for grandchildren. But how are people going to get to the park? Sustainable mobility. Walking. Walking is critical. Every single trip begins and ends by walking. Every trip to the parks, they begin and end by walking. That's how we were created, just like the birds they fly, or the fish swims, and the deer runs. People, we walk. We walk. The children, the youth, whether you are in Atlanta in the middle of the park, whether in South Africa, the youth, the older adults, everybody walks in the summer, in the winter, but we gotta make it safe. This is not really very safe. This is how we do the cities. So we really need to improve on the safety of our streets. Yesterday, people driving cars killed 741 people walking. Yesterday. That's more than one person every 2 minutes. And it's not accidents, because accidents is when they could not have been avoided. There are incidents because they can be avoided. And Vision Zero, there are many cities across the U.S. that are adopting a Vision Zero policy. And if we're going to improve walking, they got to become a priority. And they are not a priority when this is how we do cities. Or when we allow the cars to go on the sidewalks, or when we don't even do sidewalks. We're telling this woman every day, you are a second-class citizen. So we got to improve walkability everywhere. The most important, lower the speed. All the residential streets, 20 miles an hour. Not because 20 is plenty if nice, but because if you get hit at 20 miles an hour, there is 5% probability of being killed. At 40, more than 80%. And also, people walk a lot more because people don't like walking when the cars are going at 40 or 50. Instead, when the cars are going slow, more people come out and walk. That's what I'm saying. It's not a technical thing. If we have a small island in the crosswalk, we eliminate more than half of the incidents. Why are we still doing crosswalk without an island when we know that we're going to save lives? The kids are going to the beautiful museum. They don't walk here at one time. They can wait. They can cross. All of this is doable. This is the rally when you're going to do for increase by 75%. This is the kind of things that must be happening. And sustainable mobility is not just walking, it's also riding bicycles, using public transit. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, the index of public transit and bike and walk are very low. I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry, but the way we use cars is changing very, very fast. You know, in the US, in the last 4 years, the young people 16 through 24 purchased fewer cars than any time that group in the last 40 years. So there are many, many new uses. Older adults are terrified of losing their driver's license. So much that people have studied that the impact is as much as when they're diagnosed with cancer. It's not because they love cars, it's because they love mobility. They want to age in place and visit the same friends and shop in the same places. And now people talk about the driverless cars. Well, if we don't change our behavior, this is how cities look like without driverless cars, and this is how they're going to look with driverless cars. Nothing is going to change. Actually, things might even be worse. We know we're going to have less parking because not everybody's going to own one, and we know that they're going to be cheaper, but there might be many, many, many more trips. You are not going to need a driver's license. So you're not going to lose your driver's license. You are going to be able to have a car till the day you die. Children, we might even have people-less cars. You come here, you don't find parking, you tell the car to go home and come and pick you up in 2 hours. So are we going to allow people-less cars? There's going to be a lot more congestion because there are going to be a lot more trips. Also, there might be a lot more sprawl because people will say, oh, you know, who cares? I'm not going to be driving. I'm going to be working or sleeping. So it might be heaven or hell. It depends up to us. How are we going to decide? We're going to be riding bicycles. Imagine here in Raleigh, going to school. It could be really nice how it happens. You know, Copenhagen, I was mentioning about Copenhagen. Copenhagen, they had a horrible weather compared with Raleigh. However, they bike in the summer, in the winter, in the rain, in the snow. 41 out of 100 trips are done on bicycle. 41. And they're not saying, oh, we're not happy with 41. No, now they want to go to 50. And you don't even have to have special shoes to go biking. And now they're putting their public bikes, and their public bikes have GPS, and they're widening the bikeways, always separating bikes from pedestrians. They got the highways and doing bridges and doing infrastructure. And people of all ages are biking, young and old and rich and poor, but also the connectivity, walking, cycling, transit. And if we're going to improve bikeability, it's not really about painting charros or doing signs or maps or lessons. None of these things get new cyclists. They don't get addition. Maybe this makes it nicer for the 1% of people that are already cycling. Not even the public bikes. That is like getting the saddle before the horse. The only two things that increase cyclists, one is to lower the speed. So everything I said about 20 miles an hour for pedestrians is the same for cyclists. And two, to create a network, to connectivity, a network of AAA bikeways. What's AAA? All ages and all abilities. So we think of the daytime and nighttime and winter and summer, always separating the pedestrians and the cars from the cyclists. So the cyclist needs to be safe, not just paint a line. If you're going to paint a line, enhance that painted line with some plastic bollards, and it's going to make a world of difference, and create a network. This has to be like a citywide, like the Widow citywide power grid, citywide water grid, citywide bicycle grid. And if we're going to put public transit, my brother, he's a mayor of Bogota now, he says that the civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. We really need to have a public transit for everybody. It's not the poor people go use the buses. And, you know, so I was working with a mayor that said, oh, Gil, you know, people didn't like the buses. So since they didn't like these buses, he said, I put a nose on the bus, I covered the wheels, and now they look like trains. Maybe that's what your BRT should look like. You know, maybe this bus needs a nose. Part of it is marketing, the name, the colors, where they're going to go, what they're going to do. You know, it's really simple. It's a mobility math. Are we going to have one of these moving 140? Or are we going to have 140 of those moving one each? It's mobility math. And when you are going to grow by 75%, are you going to have 75% more cars? It's about equity. You know, the people that use cars, they spend 25% of their income on mobility. 25%. $1 out of $4. They would be spending only 5% if they use public transit and walk and bike. That's also why the young people now, they say, I don't want a car. A car is not a status symbol for the young people anymore. It's more of a status symbol to get an iPad or to rent an apartment in a walkable neighborhood or to get a backpack and go to Australia. So there is nothing that government could do to improve the quality of life of people more than allowing the households to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. And it would be great for the economy. Because instead of spending that money in cars built in China, You're going to spend it in the restaurants, in the grocery store, fixing the garden, the house. 5, everybody learns from everybody. I know that some of you might be thinking, oh, Gil, but Raleigh is different. We got nothing in common with Copenhagen or Bogota or New York. We are unique. I know that in Raleigh you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. This is not like on the computer, that in the computers we copy and paste, but it's how to adapt and how to improve. Everybody can learn from everybody. You can analyze what happened with Highline Park. There used to be an elevated railroad through the middle of Manhattan because they used to bring chemicals into New York, and it was horrible, and the whole area was depressed, and they didn't know what to do with it. And then the citizens and the government got together and said, you know, instead of having this horrible or turning it down, why don't we do a park? That was the idea of Highline Park. Private citizens and government working together created a conservancy. The city put in over $200 million. The private put over. The city said, we need to create a conservancy to manage it. That was one of the conditions of the city. They would not put the money if they could not find a group of citizens, a non-profit conservancy that was going to run it. And now they run it, and they do all kinds of activities. Imagine looking at the city like at the 3rd story level, and they do all kinds of activities. And it's fun, and it's exciting, and it has totally redeveloped. And the city has been a huge boom to the economy, because even the city said, we're going to get the money back. How were they going to get the money back? Through the new property, the marginal property taxes. They thought they were going to get it back in 14 years. They got it back in half the time. It was amazing. All the new development that has come out. Melbourne. People say, oh, cities don't change. Cities do change. Melbourne was horrible. 30 years ago, it would not have been one of the top 300 cities. Even they made fun of themselves. Now it's one of the top 5 cities in quality of life everywhere. What have they done? Some of the things that you are doing, and you got to do more in Raleigh. Art for people not on a car at 60 miles an hour, but for walking at 3 miles an hour. Planting trees. Look at these trees, how they look like without any trees, and you put trees, and it's totally transformative. The trees are really a nice link because the trees are good for public health and for the environment and for business and for walking and for cycling. Public transit. How they have improved their public transit. Even in many areas, they just put the public transit and just walking, they took the cars out of many of those roads. Improving public spaces. Enhancing new. They had all of these laneways that they were dark and dirty and horrible and smelly. All the people did was 3 a.m. do the things they should have done in the restaurants and the places. And the government said, why don't we improve this? Let's do restaurants and shops and flowers. And people said, oh, but you know, it's a laneway. They said, I know it's a laneway. I help you. So the city funded, the city gave them the seed money. Said, I'll give you $50,000, the seed money, to start a business or to do art or to put flower shops. And now they don't have 1 or 2 or 3. They got 81 of this. And they totally transformed the downtown of Melbourne through all of this. They had a river that goes right through the middle of Melbourne, the Yarra River. It used to be all factories. And look what they did. They turned down all of the factories and they created a linear park right through the middle of the... So this is the impact that Dix Park can have. This Yarra River totally redeveloped, but high quality, good design, good activities, good uses, and it's been good for business. No one wanted to live downtown in Melbourne. Now everybody wants to live downtown in Melbourne. There's so many things, the impact that this has had to do, the parks and the public spaces. Rotterdam, you know, people say, oh, European cities were built like that. No, Rotterdam was totally torn down during the war. They had to redo the city. Look what they have done in the last 8 years, taking that into this. That's what I was saying of parks of all sizes. Sometimes it's big one like Dix Park. Sometimes it's the smaller ones. All of them, you got parks on both sides of the street. You take them out on one side, and how it transforms, this before and after is very clear. They're going to do a building here in maybe 10, 20 years. In the meantime, they say, let's do a park. And even the public transit, how to improve it. Access to the waterfronts. Instead of having cars, take out the cars and put out the access. It's something really fantastic, the transformations that are taking place. So it's totally doable. And it's good for the economy, it's good for the health, it's good for everybody, for the environment. Sometimes when I felt hopeless, I became hopeful. When I see so many roads for cars being turned into places for parks. Look at this. There used to be a river right through the middle of this city. And 40 years ago, it was efficiency. So they put a road on top of the river. But now, they said about 8 years ago, they said, can we go to a rally and tell the people from NC State to come over here? Probably not. So they said, they brought out the river. And they created a linear park right through the middle of it. So you want to live in one or the other. You know, they used to be 6 lanes for cars. They took out the 4 lanes in the middle and another city in Copenhagen, and they created a linear park of more than a mile long. It's about transforming. Here there used to be a river through the middle of Seoul, South Korea. And then again, 50 years ago, they put 5 lanes on top of the river, got full of cars. They said, oh, let's do a second floor. It got full of cars. So then they said, oh, let's do a 3rd floor. 8 miles through the middle of Seoul. And then the mayor, very gutsy, said, I'm not going to do a 3rd floor. Actually, tore down the 2nd, tore down the 1st, brought out the river. Said the only way to solve mobility is through public transit and walking and cycling. And created this magnificent linear park. And people said, oh, Mayor, are you crazy? People are not going to stop for coffee. As if going at 60 miles an hour, people were going to stop for coffee. Now they stop for coffee because there's only 2 lanes on each side and a linear park 8 miles through the middle, or in the Madrid, the highways to the parks, or now Paris. And last, thinking about Dix Park, let's focus on the benefits. It's not about parks. It's about the environment. It's about the recreation and transportation and public health. Let me just give you one example. Public health. Is this what the future looks like? You know, this issue of obesity is a big, big problem. Billions and billions and billions. It's about heart attacks and respiratory problems and anxiety and depression. In the U.S., more than 1 out of 3 people are obese. In North Carolina, it's 30%. People say, it's always been like that. No, it's not always been like that. You know, it used to be only like 10%. And look how it's gone up. So if it went up that way, it can also come down. But it has to be a huge effort of everybody. And if we don't do anything, it's going to go to 44%. 20 years ago, we didn't have any state with more than 20%. Today, we don't have any state with less than 20%. We got to work on the school lunches. We got to work on having farmers markets. All of these are things also that Dix Park can have. Great farmers markets. Right there, you got all of these fantastic farmers markets. How to make that link? You already have it there. So making the link would be so easy and simple, but also about being active. It's not about doing marathons. It's just 30 minutes a day for adults, 60 minutes a day for children. No place better to do it than in the parks or in sidewalks as a normal part of everyday life. And all of that is going to improve the physical health of everybody. But there is no health without mental health. Today, depression is the world's leading cause of disability. Depression. If we have contact with nature, it's going to improve our cognitive attention, our mood. It's going to lower the depression. So when you see, even now that the park hasn't been built, it's magnificent. Look at these beautiful images that I saw yesterday. It's really amazing how it is and how it can be transformative. Just coming out and having a walk. And it's right in the heart of the city. So making the connection so that people, even at lunchtime, they got 45 minutes, they go in, have a walk, breathe fresh air. It could bring their dog, do a walk. If our neighborhoods have green spaces, we're going to lower the depression, the anxiety, the stress. When last week or the week before I was in Singapore, I was looking at this, how they're putting nature everywhere. In the middle of the buildings, in the walls, in the roofs, everywhere. It has become an obsession to have a city within a garden. So I just want to end by saying, how do we want to live? We got to think outside the box. These are not technical issues. These are not financial. These are political with a big P. Everybody has to participate. Everybody. And everybody thinking of Dorothea Dix Park. Anytime that you hear about a talk about mobility, a talk about the environment, a talk about physical health or mental health, or the population growth, or the children, or the older adults, you got to be at the table. You got to be at the table. You got to go to the public meetings. You got to participate. You got to make Dix Park part of the conversation. Because if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu. and you don't want to be on the menu. So when they say, oh, what a missed opportunity, so build alliances. You got to get the elected officials at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level. You got to get the public sector staff, but not only from parks. You got to get from education, from the Board of Education, from public health, from finance, from economic development. And you got to get the community, the business community, the media, the activists, everybody. How to get all three of them? It's like a three-legged stool. What is the glue? The glue is really having a sense of urgency. This is now. You got to do it now. What are you going to do? The mayor was just reelected for the next 2 years. What are you going to do in the next 2 years? It has to be kind of a countdown. You got to develop a shared vision and action. Sometimes cities develop the vision, but no action. So it just becomes frustration. People say, oh, the next door, they got lucky or what. Others people do action, but no vision. They do a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit. But if there is not a vision, then it becomes chaos. But when you have vision and you have action, Dix Park can be a really transformative, can be a trigger for a vibrant and healthy rally. So we got to move from talking to doing. I know that you are doing a lot, but you got to do more, and you got to do it faster, and you're going to continue. It's about creating how Dix Park is going to contribute to create a vibrant city with healthy communities where everybody's going to live happier. So rally, do it now. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have about 5 minutes for questions, or no, actually 7.
And if you have questions, I was told to push the little button in front of you, and that way they can record it and everybody can hear it.
It can be a question, or it can be a comment, a short comment, anything about any topic.
Would you say a few more words about buildings?
About buildings?
The buildings on the park.
Oh, the buildings on the park. Yes. Oh, well, I think that they provide a great opportunity. I think you got too many. It's over 80 buildings in the park. So a lot of them will have to be taken down. Also because a lot of them are in really, really bad condition. So unless they really provide a few of them a very historical perspective that is worth reconstructing and having them more of a showcase of the historical impact that the Dix Park has had over the years, over hundreds, then some of them are going to be taken down. Others, I would suggest to use them to have really good stakeholders. Like don't put a firm that has nothing to do with parks, but maybe people related to the arts or people entrepreneurs. Put some really, really good stakeholders so that if maybe 20 years from now, for whatever reason, the city is going through a crisis and someone says, oh, let's sell the park. You're going to have so many good stakeholders there that people won't even dare to say that because you got some heavyweights in that area. So I think that it really has to be something that is complementary. Even things that might not look complementary, maybe like the Board of Trade, but having the Board of Trade will give some weight into this. Having maybe AARP, lots of arts activities. So making something, always thinking how everything is going to be a complement. Also, it can be a source of funding. So I think it will have to be a delicate balance on what is going to contribute from the point of view of the park, because some things, for example, when you're going to give a concession to someone in the park, you're going to say, okay, you can have this hot dog stand and give me a permit, and I'm going to give you a permit for $50. That is the same as if you're going to do it in the city. No, you're not in the business of giving the permit. Enhance the dignity of that person, and also put some minimum hours. No, if you want to sell coffee or hot dogs or whatever, you got to come at least from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. If you want to stay longer, that's fine, but no less than that. I know you're not going to sell a lot on the weekdays at 10 a.m., but then it's how to have that life within the park. So I think it's a little bit of the combination. But I think many of those buildings also provide a magnificent opportunity to bring in some really fantastic stakeholders. And the decision is going to be how much of that is going to be to bring financial resources into the park, for the maintenance and how much of that is because they are artists or things that will complement sports people. And it's also to have a lot of different stakeholders so that people won't say, oh, the park is just for the sports people. No, it's nice to have sports, but also music and culture, and it's also older adults and children and the schools, and have a nice combination so that they will work with each other.
Would you? We were in Beijing not too long ago and noticed in one of the big parks that there was a lot of programming for older adults. You know, you've got forced retirement age there, and we were really struck by how active and wonderful that was. What are the best places in the world where that kind of programming is going on, and where should we look?
Well, I think in Asia there's a lot of it. Like throughout China, Singapore is really, really good at it. But also places like Copenhagen, they are very good. But that is very important, is the programming. We need to engage older adults. We did a study with the RAND Corporation, and we can give you, you are members of City Parks Alliance, so you can have free access to it. By far, the segment of the population that uses parks the least are the older adults. And when asked, it's because there's nothing to do. Simple things such as walking path. But the walking path, and by the way, sometimes I go to places and I see people, I was talking about obesity, and see people very obese having Dunkin' Donuts and coffee and watching the kids play. And I said, when are you going to do physical activity? He said, I don't have time. I'm like a taxi driver. What do you mean? Your kid is playing for an hour. Why don't you walk around the field? But that is what is the highest cost benefit. All you already have the soccer field or the baseball, do a walking path. That is also really good safety for the park, because if you do that walking path all over the park, people don't know at which time someone is going to show up. So there is no areas of the park. But also, we need to have benches, because the older adults will not walk if there are no benches. The other day I was at a city that I walked with the mayor 10 blocks. And so I won't say which city in Kentucky, but I won't say the city, just the state. There were no benches. And then I said, Mayor, I don't see any benches. And then he took me to the side and he said, oh, we took them out because of the homeless. And then I said, Mayor, and you think this is kind of magic? You take out the bench and the homeless, they get a home? You take out the benches and the homeless going to sleep on the sidewalk. But I said, it's not only bad for the homeless, it's bad for the older adults. Older adults will not walk if they don't find benches on the sidewalks. I said, I'm going to tell you something horrible. Put some benches that have a divider. And before people tell you that is against the homeless, tell them, no, those are the benches that are friendly for older adults, because it's easier to sit down and it's easier to push up. But don't take out the benches. So the walking paths in the park are critical. Also put up a sign. So this loop is 1 mile, 2 loops, 2 miles, or so on. Also have groups. People need to have those groups. Maybe the city can help get some of those groups started. Once they get started, a leader from the group will show up, and then they will take over. But they need to have someone. The city really has to play a role. I find in many places, the cities, it seems easier to find the millions to do the parks than the thousands to make it work. But if you don't have those thousands to organize the knitting group, or the walking group, or the movie night, or so, it's not going to work. Also dances, so that people can dance, but you're going to say, oh, this dance is for people 50 and over, or 60 and over, and then you're going to get a lot of older adults. We're having a huge group of population, and the main 2 issues. The other day, I saw the former Surgeon Medical of the U.S., last month. He said that more people were dying of isolation than heart attacks. People might live in a city surrounded by 1 million people, but they are isolated. So it's not just having the park, it's not just having the facility, but having the uses. So that is something that is very, very important. I'm glad that you brought that up. Yes?
Would you further talk about the benefits of a shared version and how to get one? The shared vision you were talking about?
Oh, yeah, the shared vision, that's really important. I think that one of the things that Kate has told me is that you plan to do a really massive plan. There are many ways to do it. Let me give you an example of a city similar in size to Raleigh, Vancouver. They had a really good chief planner for many years, and he was going to retire. And then he did the Vancouver vision, the 2025 vision or something. He took 2 years, and I said, Larry Beasley, I said, Larry, why did you take 2 years? It's to do a vision. And then he said, oh, look, we could have gone to a cottage with 2 of my staff, and we would have done a better vision. But this was about raising the level of the conversation. In 2 years, they had 1 out of 5 people in the city. 20% of the people were at least in one of their workshops. They went to all of the schools. They went to the businesses. They went to the faith groups, the churches, everywhere, trying to engage people. And he said it was totally transformative. Before, we would go to a public meeting to talk about widening a sidewalk, and people would be so upset with the city staff. He said, now, we go to a point, we don't even have to speak. The city staff stands on the back, and the citizens know why we need trees on the sidewalks, why we need wide sidewalks, why do we need safe crosswalks, why do we need small schools that are walk-to schools, why do we need to open up the schools in the evening. So they invested 2 years in developing that shared vision in the city, in the Vancouver that they wanted to. It was curious because a few months after that, the 2 people running for mayor invited me to spend half a day with them. And their plans, the political plans, were almost identical. They were running to see on credibility, who the people thought was going to do a better job as mayor. One was coming from the private sector, one was coming from the elected official as a councilor. But their platforms were almost identical because it was the shared vision of the city. This is like having a walkable city. Having Dix Park should not be left or right or one party or another party. They gotta be more a city issue more than any political party. So that's an example. So it's important to engage. We do lots of engagement with children, and people say, "Oh, it's good because the children are the future." I say, no. It's because if we engage the children, they go home and then they educate their parents. So that's important. 1 or 2 more? Yes? I can stay along afterwards, but let's take 2 more. Yes?
The park will evolve. I mean, this is a long-scale project. What kind of insight could you provide over the long term about evolving and how this adapts, 20, 30, 50 years from now?
I think it's going to be huge. Let me give you an example. Boeing Corporation was looking for a site to set up their headquarters. And they hired a firm to narrow the list of possibilities. And they narrowed to the 10 best places where they were going to move. And then they sent 200 of their staff, the senior staff, to the 10 cities to evaluate and say where did they want to move. They chose to move to Chicago. And they said, what was the reason? The number 1 reason was the parks and the activities in the public places in Chicago. And they said, we looked all over the place, but that was what made the difference. And in many cases, then the mayor of Chicago says, you see, that's why we're investing not only in Millennium Park. By the way, Millennium in many ways is very similar to Dix Park on the sense that it was a strong conservancy and the city working in partnership. The citizens and the city is very, very important. And now they did next to it, they did another park. And they have done a lot of investments in parks, but that was those are the kind of benefits that are going to come. Also, Amazon, for example, it's interesting that Amazon now is looking for a headquarters. But what is interesting is not really the process, but the fact that 20 years ago, they would have looked was just for capital. Who's going to give me more subsidy? And the city that gives me the biggest subsidy, that doesn't happen now. Now people first, especially the millennials, they think, where do I want to live? And then they look for work. So if Amazon is going to find 50,000 workers, they got to go to a city where 50,000 good quality people will want to work. So those are the kind of impacts that I think that Dix Park could have. I think it can have an impact in economic development, in having not only more people, but quality of people, staying longer, not just coming in, getting a job, and then moving back to some place, but actually setting the roots here and long-term living. So I think it's going to be good for the business community. I think it's going to be good for the citizens, but it can also be a trigger to have better public health, better environment, and better also higher sense of belonging and pride in the city. So I think it's multiple benefits. Yes.
My assumption is that if you were talking about a Dix Park or parks similar to Dix, then you're essentially saying that that's a hub, and if you're going to try to make certain that there are parks within 10 minutes for each child, then it is a connectivity. So it's bigger than Dix Park. It is a progressive look and making certain that it's all connected to that quality of life. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. That's why I didn't spend all the time talking about parks, but talking about some other things, like the walkability. You're walking downtown. There are many buildings that are really horrible at the street level. There's just a blank wall. You have the beautiful sidewalk. It's wide, but people don't like to walk next to blank walls. People like to walk next to windows and stores. And some of these, like parking towers, the street level should be stores and should be something that would be attractive, should be coffee shops. It's a lot of those little details. Amanda Burton in New York, she said that as of 3 years ago, they cannot have banks in the street corners. Why they don't have banks? Because the banks are not really good to bring life into the city. At 3 p.m. they're closed, and Saturday, Sunday they're closed, nothing happens. It's much nicer to have a coffee shop or something like that. So it's a lot of small details. It's about having that connectivity to the neighborhood park, to the medium park, to the big Dix Park, but also having the possibility to walk to those places, to bike to those places. And also the bike is having the connectivity. It's not just having one bikeway, but how to have that. So yes, it's a change of mindset on saying, okay, how are we going to be competitive? And all of them are really linked to each other. Having trees, the same way that we have standards for the width of the road, or we should have standards, how many trees are we going to have every block? What kind of trees? The crosswalks, how are those crosswalks? Are we going to prioritize the pedestrians or not? Are we going to say, okay, we're going to be the city in the US with the least incidents, traffic incidents? How are we going to do it? Last year, Seattle lowered the speed to 2,400 miles of roads to 20 miles an hour. 2,400. Why? Because Seattle wants to also attract those good quality millennials that many of these companies, and they want to live in cities that are walkable and bikeable and have parks, and that's why Seattle lowered 2,400 miles. So yes, it has to be something that goes way beyond Dix. Dix can be a magnificent trigger and can be a fantastic, also because people, when you do it really high level, people will go and say, oh, you know those benches? We want to have those benches in my neighborhood park. Did you see the garbage cans that Dix has? We want to have the signage, the tree, the flower. Maybe you have some really good community gardens. But also it's about thinking, it's about changing that kind of relationship. It's about developing activities, how to develop activities also, older adults, grandparents and grandchildren at the park. So those uses and activities. That issue of the mental health is absolutely critical. How to attack that and say, this is not just an issue of obesity, because obesity is very visible, but how are we going to also become the healthiest city from the point of view of mental health? So it's all of those links. That's a really important point. How are we going to get the schools to open up their schools on Saturdays and Sundays so that they will allow they become more school parks? And of course, it's not easy because the one is the Board of Education, the one is the city. But who's paying for those schools? The same taxpayer that is paying for the parks. So we need to work totally in sync. Parks and public health and education and economic development. It has to be totally in sync. And both the private sector, the public sector, the NGOs. There's the main message with that, and I'll end with that, is that we need to realize there's not going to be a Martian coming down to fix our city. It's up to all of us working together and developing that shared vision, but a lot of action. The vision is important because if we know the kind of rally that we want, it's a lot easier. It's like a puzzle, the image of a puzzle. So it doesn't matter which pieces of the puzzle we're doing, as long as are pieces of the same puzzle. But if we don't have an image and we're just doing things, we are going to end up with a Frankenstein that nothing is going to work with anything. So I thank you very much for coming this morning, and I wish you all the very best, and congratulations on all you are doing.
I'd like to wrap up with just a couple of quick thank yous. First, I want to thank Ann and Jim Goodnight and SAS for hosting us this morning in this fantastic space. I'd like to thank the political leadership and the Conservancy Board leadership and all of the donors for getting this project to this place. I'd like to thank everybody in this room in advance for being a part of the growing number of people who are developing this shared vision for what we can accomplish with Dix Park for the entire community. And of course, I want to thank Gil Penalosa for giving us such remarkable insights and inspiration to take it from here and keep on moving forward. Thank you all for being here this morning, and thank you again, Gil.